Hello there and welcome back to one of our videos. And today's video, we're going to be talking to all you parents out there who would really love to be a successful youth sports parent. We're going to talk about all the details for that next. All right, parents, we need to talk about subtle ways that we might be putting too much pressure on our kids that would actually drive them out, all in our attempt to do what we really do want to do in a good way, which is set high expectations. So we'll be talking about that. Let's learn how to listen better, get them to finish what they start, then understand what they really remember about the whole experience. So we'll be talking about all that and more next. One of the biggest challenges that we have as parents is really wanting to help our child get better, right? So they've had a bad game and we have a tendency to want to try to help them figure it out, maybe even build them up. And the word artificially isn't really quite right, but if they've just struck out like 3 times, once with the bases loaded, just had a really bad game, and we start trying to say, you swung at bad pitch here. If you had and start coaching them, trying to help them, learn from those challenges, very often the kid's emotionality is they're just now beginning to think that we as parents are basically saying they didn't do good enough, and here's how we want to get them better. There's a real subtle role difference between being a parent, being a coach, and I played both those roles, right? I was a coach, but I'm also trying to be the parent. And sometimes the parent side has got to really back off, right? And just give them some time to deal with that emotion and then say, so what do you think happened, right? So how can we improve on this? What lessons do we need to take from that? And through the questioning process, you can probably do a lot better job helping them learn to coach themselves, which is really ultimately what we want to instill. Even when I was coaching, I wanted to help my athletes learn to coach themselves. If I have somebody who's out on the court, out on the soccer field, playing baseball, who can go inside themselves and figure out the mistakes they just made, I've really done a whole much better job. So that's probably the biggest thing that parents can do is really begin to learn to separate out those roles a little bit. And through the coaching, it's more about um, asking better questions. Everyone who's working with young people, even even in the professional world, right? We have expectations that are trying to be set for us to meet. We want to raise our standards, right? We want to hold people accountable to high expectations for themselves and whatever organization team we belong to. So we want to do that with our kids as well. And again, there's some subtle differences from like looking at just statistics. And statistics are an important part of sports. It's one of the ways that we have of measuring ourselves, right? We have the data to look at. So we need to be able to have high expectations, but we want to covet those or put those in the context of us always working on getting better, right? We want to keep improving and striving to improve and striving to win. And it's that very subtle notion of not comparing ourselves to some artificial uh, data point, right? Some artificial time or batting average or shooting percentage or something. We want to be looking at it on where we are and trying to get a little bit better each day. There's this 1% rule of a coach who had taken over the British biking team, national biking team, and the British were not good. Then he started implementing this idea of 1% better in like 10, 11, 12 different areas. So we're going to going right from how you set up the bike to your own physical performance. 1% better in all these areas makes you 10%, 12% better overall, which is a huge gain. And when that was implemented, the British biking team became one of the top teams in the world. In the coaching that I do now is not much different than the coaching I did in a classroom, because I often consider myself more of a coach in the classroom than a teacher, or the coaching outside of the classroom setting. And a huge component of that is asking questions and listening, trying to figure out what's going on inside the person. And asking questions really helps to shape their thinking and help them process, help them do something I've been throwing out for an idea in some of these videos, this idea of deep practice, which is incredibly important, often overlooked, not fully understood, but that's what kind of the job is beginning to get the athlete, the student, whoever it is, to think about their thinking about their process on how they are doing X, Y, Z, right? Whatever it is. And if we want to have them keep raising the bar, so to speak, we need to help them think about this whole process. I can tell you about one high school athlete I'd worked with who was one of the top sprinters in the state, came into senior year with high expectations for herself, right? There was expectations from others because she was really good, expected to compete for the state title with her arch enemy, her nemesis, who she'd never beaten. Well, all through the regular season, her times had not improved at all from her junior year. That really got into the whole thinking process. So when I was coaching and working with her to try to break down, find out what some of these things were, once we found out what some of these blocks were that she had, we were able to take those out into the last regular season meet, personal record, meet record. In the uh, in the league meet, she set a league record, personal record. Regional meet, regional record, personal record. State meet, state record, and state title. She ended up getting a D1 scholarship, and a lot of that was her beginning to learn and understand what she was doing inside that was creating some of these blocks. There's one other recommendation that I mention to parents, particularly when the kids are young and they're trying out different things, is they might try a new sport and it's just not really working for them, right? They might struggle early on and they aren't happy with that. They don't like failure or knowing that they aren't doing that well. Because of that, they begin to not want to go. I think it's vitally important as a parent that we kind of get them to understand we finished the season. We're going to finish it out. Don't have to do this next year, but we're going to show up. You're going to do your best. You're going to finish the season. Sometimes things will turn around and they want to keep doing this and want to try it again. Sometimes they don't, and that's perfectly fine. But finishing what you start is really important on lots of levels, including the fairness to the other families and teams and other kids who've also signed up who can't have people quitting at the first sign of trouble. So finish what you start, really important value to instill. For a lot of us parents, right, the car ride home after a tough loss, after a bad performance, has an opportunity to be a positive or a negative experience. And I've known too many parents who, out of good intentions, begin to kind of grill the kid. Even when we just talk about asking questions and listening, they're doing it right then when the kid's still kind of in that emotion. And the questions are about like what they might have done wrong, trying to point out how they could have done better. And the timing of that isn't good. And that's that role where they want you to be the parent then. And if you ask questions, it might be more related to just how they're feeling. Like, so how are you creating that feeling in you right now? you should think about how you're doing that, because if you wallow in it and you aren't feeling good and you keep replaying it over and over, that's just going to make it harder the next time, right? So the best advice I give for that car ride home most of the time is just let them be for that, however long that time is. And then give them a chance to kind of get away from that moment, give them some space, and then we can begin to process those tough games. Well, we just wrapped up yet another video. I encourage you to please subscribe to our channel and check out all the other videos there. You also might want to be interested in registering for one of our free webinars, in particular, emotional hygiene. So register for that webinar today. Come back and see another video.